Welcome back to another episode of Recreating Jurassic Park. This is a Jurassic World Evolution 2 series on a mini Nublar Island. This series has taken a lot longer than expected. So far, we are on episode 4. The first speed build was for Proceratosaurus, and our second speed build was the Baryonyx, with our third speed build being the Triceratops. This week we have another really well-known dinosaur, the Velociraptor. I was a little hesitant to do two movie dinosaurs right next to each other, but I think it worked out. I was actually really excited to do this build, and as you can see, in between episodes, I ended up planning out most of the island. For this first section, I always struggle to figure out a shape for an enclosure because I always want to have interesting shapes. I don't want to have the same looking enclosures all over my builds. It started out as a really basic egg shape, but then I figured I could probably cut this in half and still have enough room for the Velociraptors, along with allowing me space to set up a backstage area for them. Out of all of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, I thought that the Velociraptor was the most needing of a backstage area. Despite them living in the desert, I feel like they would have the same kind of needs as a aquatic mammal, needing a lot of hands-on interaction with their trainers, along with a lot of one-on-one enrichment and personal care. Now, as a lot of fans of Jurassic Park know, the Velociraptor was actually based off of the Deinonychus in terms of skull shape, and then size-wise, it's closer to the Utahraptor, which wasn't actually discovered until after the original movie had been filmed and released. The Velociraptor is thought to have been a small, feathered, desert-dwelling dinosaur. They belong to the group of dinosaurs known as Dromaeosaurids, which Deinonychus too was a part of. Despite the Hollywoodification of the Velociraptor, a lot of people actually do understand how small it was compared to the Velociraptors we see on screen. They were roughly the same size as modern-day turkeys. Now, I mentioned desert dwelling in the earlier parts of my Velociraptor recap to explain that I wanted to make a desert enclosure for these guys. Now, in terms of gameplay, it doesn't really work out that great because for the game requirements, they need a lot more cover than a desert would provide. So this was the first enclosure where it came in really handy to have the dinosaurs' needs turned off. But it was also a lot of fun trying to fit a different biome into the tropical biome of the game. If you haven't tried to do so in Jurassic World Evolution 2, I would highly recommend it as it is a huge challenge, but it is super, super fun. Speaking of, yes, this is Jurassic World Evolution 2. Yes, I know Jurassic World Evolution 3 has come out. I have started playing the campaign for it, and I think it's a lot of fun. But I have hours upon hours of footage for Jurassic World Evolution 2, so that's what I'll be posting for the time being until I get some footage of Jurassic World Evolution 3. But when I inevitably run out of footage, I will choose Jurassic World Evolution 3 over Jurassic World Evolution 2 most likely. Jurassic World Evolution 3 does offer a lot more leeway when it comes to placing down items and objects, but it is also a lot harder on my PC than Jurassic World Evolution 2 is. Now that the elephant's out of the room, I want to get back to our speed build. So for this section is the human half of the backstage area where the humans will be rather than the Velociraptors. Despite needing hands-on interactions with their keepers, I would also assume that they can't be too hands-on with their keepers because we don't need keepers losing hands. When it comes to the backstage area, I wanted to have one section where they could get into the enclosure itself and maybe do maintenance, while there would be a second entrance to behind the containment units for the Velociraptors where the trainers can go and interact with them through the bars of their enclosures. I can see that being one heck of a job. Imagine going home for the holidays and telling your parents that you work as a Velociraptor trainer at Jurassic Park. Going back to the terraforming of the enclosure, I wanted to create a little hill area to try and block the backstage access from the enclosure to the backstage from the view of the visitors. It's just one of those things where usually zoos and other places try to conceal the areas to their backstage as to not break the magic for their guests. And this is our second enclosure where we are placing all of the items individually into the enclosure. As much as I love being able to just throw in a bunch of scenery, sometimes I don't really like the layout or the way that it contours to the landscape. I much prefer being able to guide people's vision into a very specific spot using the different elevations and the different types of foliage. One thing I will add is that my rock addiction has gotten so much worse, especially with Jurassic World Evolution 3. I mentioned that I've been playing the campaign a little bit, and with the campaign, I've ended up ignoring it to place rocks. I love my rocks. It just makes enclosures feel more natural and like they're thought out. I enjoy the Jurassic World Evolution 3 campaign a little more than 2 because I like the idea of jumping from place to place. It kind of keeps things a little more interesting than being stuck all in one place all at the same time. But also, the babies are so stinking adorable. I cannot get over how cute they are. I'm mostly just sad that this specific park will probably never see babies unless it's rebuilt in Jurassic World Evolution 3, which I don't really want to do, but I might end up doing it in a couple years. We've reached about the halfway point, and I'm just finishing up the enclosure with a couple last pieces of brush. Next, we're going to be kind of decorating the outside of it. I want to make the entire area feel like the desert, as if you went from trekking through the forest to now you're walking through a tiny desert. There's 2 sections in this park that end up looking like a small desert, but this one's probably like the most well done and my favorite out of the 2. The second one ends up more as a desert floodplain than just desert. Here we're starting the first section of the backstage area, which would be the maintenance entrance. Gotta make sure that there's cameras so that the Velociraptors don't try and do anything. And this section back here is so that they can stay away from the guest prying eyes, because I do plan on having that path along the side of the enclosure continue on into a hotel area for the guests. I wanted to create kind of a coastal resort area. The coastline behind the mountain felt too small to do anything with a dinosaur, so I figured this was the best use for it. The entirety of the backstage area is definitely my favorite part of this entire enclosure. I like having the separate holding facilities for the different Velociraptors. I end up fitting 4 Velociraptors into here, but there's only 3 containment facilities, so I figured story-wise it would be there's 2 sisters, a male and another female, so the 2 sisters would hopefully, fingers crossed, get along, and so 2 sisters in one, male in another, and the other female in the third. I would definitely think that this park is more conservation friendly than the original Jurassic Park, as they hopefully would have the animals and the guests' best interest in mind rather than just the guests and the guest experience. So theoretically, this is what Jurassic Park would turn into after given the funding and the green light from their investors. That's one thing that I think the original park definitely skipped out on, was enrichment for the animals, because enrichment is definitely an outlet for animals so they don't, 1, get into trouble, or 2, so they can continue to live as if they are wild animals. Proper enrichment is something that a lot of people don't quite understand. I've learned this through kind of watching and learning how to train and work with dogs and other animals. A lot of people tend to get mad at their animals for destructive behaviors when in actuality their animals are just bored. So who knows, maybe if Jurassic Park had actual enrichment for their dinosaurs, they wouldn't have had such a big problem. Because in the first movie, the humans were basically the equivalent of a squeaky toy for a dog. Because throughout the entire movie, a lot of the characters' first reaction was to scream and kind of make themselves more appealing to the dinosaurs to hunt and everything. I feel kind of crazy saying all of this stuff, but like, it's something that I don't really see people talking about when they go on a deep dive about the original movie. It's one of those things that I wish I could have seen more of in Jurassic World Evolution 3. Frontier did a really good job in Planet Zoo on making sure that we give our animals enrichment, but I didn't see a lot of that in Jurassic World Evolution 3. And it kind of makes me sad because I was really looking forward to possibly having something of that sort. The closest thing we have is a more in-depth version of the terrain painting and the terrain needs for the different dinosaurs, which I'll take it, but it's not enrichment. Enrichment is definitely one of my favorite aspects of the zoo managing or the park managing game genre. Because you're going to need more than just a flashy enclosure for your animals, which is essentially all we have for Jurassic World Evolution 2 and 3. With that rant aside, I really like how this enclosure turned out. I really enjoyed the aspect and the challenge of trying to create a different biome. I learned a lot in terms of fitting in enclosures into awkward spaces with this one, because I didn't have a lot of space for this one because this was the last enclosure that I had planned, but it was the first one that I ended up building out of all of the enclosures that I did plan, and it definitely turned out a lot better than I expected it would. Now, I also want to talk about the tram system and or car system. I wanted to incorporate it into this park as it was a major part in the original film. And so I bring this up not because the tram tour is going to go through the Velociraptor enclosure, but that's actually where I wanted it to end. I have two entrances, one next to the Triceratops enclosure and one next to the Velociraptor enclosure. So you have it going through about half of the park and then dropping you back off at this other section of the park. There are two tram-specific enclosures that you don't actually get to see unless you take the tour, but everything else can be seen on foot. This last section of the speed build is the exit area for the tram tour. I figured since the tour goes across about half of the park, it would be a good idea to have a seating area right as you get out, along with a food area. I also wanted to use these planters as a storytelling aspect, as you got on in a deciduous area and you are now getting off in a desert area. So closer to the exit, you have the deciduous trees and deciduous planters, while closer to the Velociraptor enclosure, you have the desert planters. I kind of stole this plaza idea from Evolution Square so that people could have a more secluded area to eat their food, along with leaving a pathway along the outside for people to walk around the food court. This section turned out a lot better than I had expected, and I'm so glad it did because I was kind of at a loss for how I wanted to decorate it, which has kind of been a theme for the entirety of this park. But with this section finished, I will say that brings us to the end of our speed build. I hope everybody enjoyed and maybe even learned something along the way. With all that being said, though, we are on to the final shots of today's speed build. I hope everybody enjoyed today's speed build. Don't forget to like, share, and maybe even follow. While you're down there, don't forget to check out the comment section and maybe even leave name suggestions for our dinosaurs. And don't forget to ring the bell icon to make sure you don't miss the next episode of Recreating Jurassic Park.